Hi, I'm Mike Kenberger with Tricky Fast Studios. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about the dialogue service in Cat RPG Builder. By the end of this video, you should be able to create dialogue, attach it to characters, and show it in the game. You should also be able to attach conditions to the dialogue to determine which dialogue should be shown at any given time. So I'm going to start with this basic scene here. It has a player, it has some geometry, not much else. First thing we're going to do is take a look under the conductor. Notice that we don't have a dialogue service, so that's the first thing we're going to add. Under Cat New Services, Dialogue Service. So the dialogue service has a few options. There's two types of dialogue in Cat. There's windowed, and there's speech bubble. So windowed will show in a normal UI window, as traditional UI window. If you set it to speech bubble, it'll pop up, a little bubble above the person's head, depending on how you define the UI. So the next thing in here is the default. You can override these at any level, but the next thing is to set the actual prefabs for both the window and the speech bubble. We're going to use the ones that are from the example here. So we've got a dialogue window, and I think this is overhead dialogue. So we'll set those. We need to set the window parent for popping up the dialogue window. We're going to set that to named, and we have a canvas here, so we'll just put that in main canvas. You can set the player sprite. You can set the audio mixer group for voiceover. We're not going to bother with either of those right now. So the next thing we want to do is create a character. We're just going to do that by creating a cube. Alright, so we get our cube. Now, we just talked about interactions in a previous video, so we're going to add an interaction manager to this cube. We're also going to add, we have an interaction service, that's good. We're going to add an interaction as well. This one's going to be the dialogue interaction. So this is pretty simple. Whenever you interact using this, it'll pop up the default dialogue for that character. So in order to do that, we also need a dialogue manager. So we're going to add that. And there's a few options here. Like I said, you can override the display type. You can override the speech bubble prefab, the dialogue window. Accumulate lines, if you turn that on, every line will kind of stack up instead of disappearing. That for some types of games, that's what you'd want. You can select a character portrait, and then also the character name. Let's call this QB. Alright, so now that we have a dialogue manager, let's add some dialogue. First thing here is to add an actual dialogue. So there's three levels for the dialogue service. There's dialogue, dialogue line, and response. So dialogue is a set of dialogue lines that are kind of connected together, and it's this single unit that will be displayed. So we have a couple options here. There's different playback types. You'll notice that some of these are similar from other things, but you can set it to serial. You can set it to only play the first dialogue line. Serial will be go in order from top to bottom, and single random means that it will just pick a random dialogue line. You can also override the display type and the UI if you want at this level. And over here we have a storage level. We're actually going to set that and set this dialogue. We're going to call this first dialogue, right? So we're going to set this to first dialogue. Restart on exit. So you can either have your dialogue reset after the player's seen it, so that the next time they click on them, it goes back to the first line, or you can have it remember the position so that the next time they click, it'll continue from wherever they left off. Now we can put conditions under this dialog. We'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, let's move on and add a dialog line. So dialog line, we have obviously the text here. So we're just going to say, hi, how are you? We can override the display type. We can set a delay for how long this line will display. That will happen if there's like no responses or anything like that. And you can also set a next line name if you want to skip to some other line. Again, you can override stuff. You can add the audio clip for voiceover, along with setting the audio source options. You can also override the name and portrait for the character for every line. So if you have a dialogue where you start speaking to one person, but then another character interjects, you would just add a new line to that same dialogue and then change the override portrait and character name. So underneath here, we want to add some responses. RPG, dialogues, dialogue response. So you can see we can have a line here. So we asked, how are you? So we're going to say good. And then let's duplicate that and change that to bad. All right. So we have two responses here. Let's just take a look, see how this works. So we're using the UI from the RPG demo. So let's come over here. We'll click on our cube. And you can see it has the name, and it's saying, hi, how are you? You can say good or bad. However, nothing happens because if you look under these responses, it doesn't exit the dialogue. It doesn't specify a next line name, so it's really got nothing to do. So let's close that. So let's just add another line here. So we'll add cat RPG dialogue line. So we'll call this good line. And then we'll say that's great. And then we'll give this one a delay of 3 seconds so that it will show for 3 seconds and then be done. And let's add another line for bad. And we'll say that's too bad. Same with the delay, 3 seconds. So now in this response, next line name, we can set to good line. For bad, we'll set to bad line. And now if we hit play, we click on this guy. How are you? Good. It says that's great, and then it disappears. If we say bad, it says that's too bad, and then it disappears. So that's a good example of just one dialogue. So what if we wanted to have a conditional dialogue so that if we've already talked to this guy, he's going to say something else? So the first thing we need to do is make sure we have a storage service. So let's add a new services local storage service. Now there's no settings to set up for that. And then let's add a second dialogue here. We'll call this second. And then we'll rename here. And in this case, we'll say, oh, it's you again. And we'll have our responses be yes. And we'll remove the next line and no. And we'll have them both exit the dialogue if you click on them, and then we can get rid of these 2 lines that were copied in. So now if we were to play this, nothing's going to be different. Right? So we're going to click on this. Hi, how are you? Good. That's great. So you can see in the editor here, in the hierarchy, The second line is blue and the first line is kind of greenish. That means that it's active. So if we click on it, you can see that it's running. You can see that it switched to that line. So this one just continues to stay active. So now we've kind of just saved that we've already seen it. So we're going to clear the local storage just to wipe everything because it recorded all that just happened. So now all we need to do is add underneath here a condition for has seen dialog. Let's just move that up to the top here. So we just want to set the dialog ID to first dialog, right? And as of now, it'll only show this if you've already seen the first dialog, but that's not what we want. We want the opposite of that. So we'll click negate. So now, if we were to play this, we can come through here. And if you watch, see how this first dialog is active. We click on it. Now second dialog is active because I've already spoken to it. So we say good, and it says that's great. This dialog is going to finish. Now you can see it's not active anymore. It's not even showing blue. It's just not active at all. If we click on this, the second dialog comes up. Oh, it's you again. Yes. And we can keep showing that second dialog. So the other thing we could do is you can add actions to different things. You can actually add them at any level here. And so for instance, if you put an action on the dialog, it'll start when the dialog is started. So let's add an action here. We can say a translate action. And we'll have it translate 1 unit in X, 0.25 seconds. And then over here, we'll add one underneath. Actually, let's add one under the good line as well, so you can add them under lines. And then we'll just make it go back. And then you could actually also add them under response. So we'll add one under the response. So, and let's add this for 1Z. Okay. Let's just copy that, paste that under there, and we'll do -1Z. So now let's clear the storage again and see what happens. So the first thing is if we click on this and show this first dialog, this translate action that I have selected should run. So let's try that. You can see that it ran. It says run count 1. You saw the box move. So now I believe we had a translate action associated with the good line. So let's hit good, and it moves back. So now on the second dialog, we had translate actions associated with the responses. So if we hit the yes response, it goes that way. If we hit the no response, it comes back. And that's what it looks like to attach actions to dialogues. You can also attach else actions to responses, and that way if someone selects a different response, then the else action will run. You can put conditions under dialogue lines as well as dialogues, and if they're under a dialogue line, that will determine whether that line is shown or not. So the next thing let's talk about quickly is the actual dialogue window and how that's put together. So if we take a look after I've popped it up under this canvas, we have a dialog window. It's just a regular window here. It has a regular panel, but we have a data bind base so that we pass the data binding down. And then this character icon, which is not really hooked up right now, but character name is hooked up. So the data binding for that, there's data binding for all these things. There's a UI dialog character name data bind. So we just set that. There's really no options you need to add, and it's good to go. So then there's the dialog line, which is another text. And for that, there's the UI dialog line data bind. Again, there's really no other options you need to set. And then on the bottom, we have the responses. And to show the responses, there's a UI layout. There's a UI dialog responses layout group data bind. Right? And we have that set in a vertical layout group that will cycle through all the responses that are available, spawn this prefab that we have, which is these two things down here. Now we have each one of these is both a button and a state machine, and also has a data bind base attached to it. So because it's a button, you can click on it. But underneath there for the text, we have this response. And as part of that, we have a UI dialog response line data bind. And again, there's no extra options you need to set there. And then we have this dialog response behavior, which is similar to a button trigger, but basically whenever it gets triggered, the button gets triggered, then it will do whatever is needed for that dialog response, you know, going to the next line or ending the dialog or any of those things. And that's really it. It's pretty easy to set up. Should be easy to use the data binding. You can always just use the example that comes with CatRPG. Now, one more thing we can do. So let's try showing off the speech bubble. So we can click on this second dialog here, set the dialog override display type to speech bubble. I don't know that the speech bubble UI that we have here supports responses, but that's certainly a thing that you could do. So let's hit play here. So when I check on it, it's showing the first dialog, and that's going to go away. And then the second dialog is now active. So we click that. Oh, there, look at that. We've got the pop-up above its head. It's not going to go away because the responses aren't working. But you could just add responses underneath there as normal, and that would totally work. So in this video, you should have learned how to set up the dialog service, how to add dialogue to a character, how to use conditions on dialogues, and how to show actions on dialogues, how to show speech bubbles, and quite a few other things. I hope you found this video informative and useful. Let us know in the comments if there are other videos or tutorials you'd like to see. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media for the latest videos and other news. For more information on Cat or Cat RPG Builder and how they can help you build and prototype RPGs faster, please visit catgamebuilder.com. I'm Mike Canverger with Tricky Fast Studios. Thanks for watching.